The demiurge has ruled this world for thousands of years, shaping reality itself into a closed system, a self-reinforcing prison where most souls never question the walls around them. His authority has felt absolute, timeless, unquestionable, but that assumption is wrong. According to Gnostic prophecy, this rule was never meant to last forever. It has an expiration date. Because what is unfolding now is not just another rise and fall, not another repeating loop dressed up as progress. This is the final aeon. And the final aeon is not a cycle, it is the end of all cycles. It is the moment when the reincarnation wheel stops spinning, when souls are no longer fed back into the same patterns of forgetting, when the machinery that recycles consciousness begins to grind to a halt. The false light that has guided humanity for ages starts to fade, losing its grip, losing its authority, revealing itself for what it always was, and something else moves in to take its place. Something older, truer, the true pleroma. This is not a distant future or a symbolic idea. This is motion. This is collapse. This is a structure breaking under its own weight. Power that depended on belief is weakening. Illusions that required constant maintenance are thinning. The sense of permanence that once held everything together is cracking, and beneath it, something vast and unfamiliar is pressing through. That pressure you feel, that quiet unease, that sense that reality itself is unstable, is not accidental. It is the sign of a transition already in motion. The false order fades, the wheel slows, and the true pleroma breaks through into this reality. What you are sensing now is not anticipation, it is recognition, a quiet understanding that something has already shifted beneath the surface of things long before it could be named. The ancient storytellers never spoke of this moment as a sudden arrival. They described it as a slow crossing, a passage you would one day realize you were already inside. For centuries beyond counting, those who moved outside official histories whispered of an age when the structure of reality would begin to loosen, not through invasion or destruction, but through awareness returning to itself. They spoke of a prison that would not collapse outward, but would begin to tremble from within, walls thinning, boundaries softening, a ruler coming to realize that his dominion was never eternal. They called this threshold the final aeon, not another turn of the wheel, not another rise and fall, but the last great movement before meaning itself transforms. Hidden texts buried beneath the sands of Egypt did more than warn of a trap. They hinted at timing. At a moment when the mechanism sustaining the illusion would falter, these writings were never meant to be shouted. They were sealed away, protected from the wrong kind of attention, because their danger was subtle. They did not threaten with violence, they threatened with recognition. Most people imagine apocalypse as fire, judgment, collapse imposed from above. But the older meaning cuts in a different direction. Apocalypse is an unveiling, a revealing. The instant when what has always been present but obscured becomes impossible to ignore. In this view, the end is not about punishment. It is about release. The unveiling is not meant to destroy humanity, but to free it from a forgetting so complete it came to feel like nature itself. The Gnostic imagination framed this liberation as collective, but not centralized. No savior descending from the sky, no single event everyone witnesses at once. Instead, a threshold reached quietly as enough souls begin to remember at the same time. When that remembering reaches a kind of critical density, the system that depends on sleep can no longer sustain itself. The world as a closed loop begins to fail. The demiurgic order, as it was symbolized, was never built on brute force alone. Its true strength lay in distraction, in endless movement outward. In stories convincing enough to keep attention pointed away from the source, layer upon layer of illusion, each one believable, each one feeding the next. Fear, desire, identity, achievement, loss. Hope deferred just far enough to keep the search going. Yet this system carried a flaw so fundamental it could never be fully repaired. It required participation, not conscious loyalty, but unconscious consent. It needed belief that did not know it was believing. It fed on fear that never questioned its origin. It thrived on seeking that never turned inward. The moment belief hesitates, the moment attention pauses and asks a deeper question, something fractures. The crack is subtle at first, almost invisible, a sense that the old explanations no longer satisfy, a quiet refusal to fully invest in narratives that once felt unquestionable. One crack does not bring down a world, but cracks multiply. And when they do, the foundation begins to give way. This was never presented as wishful thinking. The ancient observers described it as pattern. They watched cycles in the heavens and cycles in human history, empires rising and dissolving, beliefs solidifying and then hollowing out. They understood that everything bound by time carries an ending within it. Even the architect of the closed world, in their mythic language, was bound by the same law. Trapped within the structure he enforced. Where there is a beginning, there is always an end. The final eon marks that ending, not as annihilation, but as exposure, the counterfeit order thinning enough for a deeper light to reach this realm again. One vision preserved in secret speaks of rulers losing their power not through defeat, but through irrelevance. When the fullness of time arrives, when those who carry the inner spark complete their long remembering, the illusions that once held everything together simply unravel. The false light fades without resistance, and what was kept in place by confusion finds itself no longer contained by it. This is not an escape through force, but a return through recognition. A return that occurs not because permission is granted, but because the soul remembers it never truly belonged to the prison in the first place. And this is where the story turns quietly toward you. Not as an accusation, not as a demand, but as an invitation to notice why this narrative feels less like history and more like a description of your own moment. Because if the final aeon were truly distant, it would feel abstract. If it belonged only to the past, it would feel symbolic. Instead, it carries a strange immediacy, a sense that the world you were taught to trust no longer holds together the way it once did. That certainty has thinned, that something essential is slipping through the cracks. The Gnostics would have said, this is how you recognize the threshold, not through spectacle, but through instability, not through miracles, but through doubt that refuses to go away. When the prison begins to shake, it does not announce itself. It reveals itself through tension, through a growing inability to fully inhabit the old stories. Through a quiet awareness that something fundamental is changing, even if you cannot yet say what. This is not the collapse itself. It is the signal that the collapse has already begun. If the structure has begun to crack, the next question is unavoidable. What does that look like from the inside? How does a world reveal that it is nearing the end of its own logic? The old teachings never offered a single sign you could point to and say, this is it. Instead, they spoke in patterns, in shifts of atmosphere, in changes so widespread they could only be felt, not announced. The final eon, they suggested, would be recognized not by extraordinary events, but by a quiet reorientation of attention, a rise in inner knowing that spreads without permission. A growing number of people who find themselves questioning the stories they were given, not because they were told to rebel, but because those stories no longer answer the pressure building inside them. They called this Gnosis not as a belief system, but as a kind of remembering that bypasses authority. It does not arrive as a conclusion. It arrives as discomfort, as a sense that something essential has been left out of the version of reality you were taught to accept. In the language of myth, this was the moment when the unseen rulers would grow uneasy, when control would require more effort, more noise, more urgency, more division. Because silence, in such a time, becomes dangerous. Silence allows attention to turn inward, and inward attention weakens the machinery that depends on constant outward pull. You can sense this tension now without attaching any doctrine to it. The world feels louder, faster, more fragmented than it once did. Systems that appeared immovable suddenly feel unstable. Institutions that shaped identity for centuries struggle to hold trust. Narratives once repeated without question now provoke unease. Information escapes channels that were designed to contain it, moving too quickly to be controlled. None of this needs to be framed as good or bad. It can simply be observed as a symptom, a sign that the old methods no longer operate as smoothly as they once did. The ancient texts spoke of this moment as the lifting of veils, not all at once, not everywhere, but unevenly, enough for doubt to breathe, enough for people to begin seeing through what once appeared solid. And as perception shifts, fear tends to rise, division sharpens, crisis multiplies. This is not necessarily because danger has increased, but because control becomes more difficult when awareness stops moving automatically. In mythic terms, desperation is not strength, it is exposure. When a system doubles down on distraction, on conflict, on manufactured urgency, it reveals its dependence on those very tools. When attention is constantly pulled outward, there is little space for reflection. When the same fears are recycled and the same crises return with new names, something in you starts to notice. Awareness introduces friction, and friction slows the machine. This is why the final Aeon was never portrayed as a battle fought in the material world. No army could defeat the rulers of perception. No external revolution could overthrow a kingdom built from belief. The prison, in this telling, is not stone or iron. It is narrative, identity, the unexamined story of who you are and what reality requires of you. And that kind of prison dissolves only from within. One moment of awareness at a time, one interruption in the automatic flow, one refusal to fully invest in fear where curiosity might be possible instead. As this happens collectively, the effect becomes visible even to those who cannot name it. People feel disoriented. The old paths no longer lead where they promised. Success feels hollow. Failure feels less definitive. Certainty erodes. This disorientation is often mistaken for collapse, but the myth suggests something subtler. When the map no longer matches the terrain, confusion is inevitable. The discomfort is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that perception is adjusting to a reality it was never trained to see. The Gnostics describe this as the beginning of the end for the archontic grip on human perception. Not because the rulers disappear, but because their influence weakens. The veils thin. What was hidden becomes visible, not through revelation imposed from above, but through attention reclaimed from below. As more people begin to see through the illusion must work harder to maintain itself, and in that effort, it becomes easier to recognize. You might notice this personally before you ever connect it to a larger pattern, a sense that the answers you were given feel shallow, a resistance to narratives that demand your fear but offer no depth, a growing impulse to decide for yourself what resonates, even when you cannot yet articulate why. This is not rebellion for its own sake. It is alignment, an inner calibration adjusting to a frequency that was previously drowned out by noise. In the old language, the divine spark within each person was said to respond to this shift. As the outer structures lose coherence, the inner light grows more visible, not dramatically, not heroically, quietly, as a preference for clarity, as a pull towards stillness, as an intuition that truth cannot be fully outsourced without cost. Consciousness, once stirred, resists indefinite containment. It does not need to be convinced, it only needs space. This is why the final Aeon feels urgent without being loud. why it feels personal without being isolating. The change does not demand that everyone awaken at once. It only requires enough people to stop moving automatically, enough pauses, enough moments of remembering, enough quiet refusals to let fear make decisions on your behalf. The rest unfolds as consequence. The ancient writers never promised comfort during this phase. They hinted at instability, at a world that feels less predictable, less anchored to old assurances. But beneath that instability, they suggested, lies an opportunity rarely available in human experience, a chance to see beyond the surface, a chance to participate consciously in a transition that usually passes unnoticed. The final aeon is not something you wait for. It is something you recognize by the way it disrupts what you thought you knew. And if that recognition feels unsettling, it may be because it is meant to. The myth does not offer reassurance that everything will stay the same. It offers a quieter invitation to notice what no longer holds, to sense what is trying to emerge, and to consider the possibility that the confusion you feel is not a failure of understanding, but the first sign that perception itself is changing. If the confusion has begun to feel personal, it's because the story was always meant to arrive here, beneath the language of rulers and realms, beneath symbols of collapse and return. The ancient myth quietly shifts its focus inward. It introduces Sophia not as a distant deity, but as an image of wisdom itself, moving through loss and remembering. In the old telling, she descends into the lower realms, and, through that descent, gives rise to a distorted creation. Yet this fall is never framed as failure. It is experience. Separation that makes awareness possible. Her long journey back toward the light is marked by suffering, yes, but also by discovery. She learns that nothing she endured was meaningless. Every moment of confusion became a pressure that refined perception. When she turns back toward the fullness, she does not ascend alone. She brings with her those who recognize themselves within the darkness, those who sensed the illusion and chose inner knowing over numb acceptance. In this symbolic return, the foundation of the false world begins to dissolve, not through attack, but through remembrance. This is where the myth stops being cosmic spectacle and becomes intimate instruction. Because you are not positioned as an observer watching Sophia rise, you are placed inside her movement. Every time you question a belief simply because it was handed to you, something shifts. Every time you choose awareness over distraction, clarity over outrage, presence over reflex, you withdraw energy from a system that depends on unconscious reaction. The story never demands perfection. It speaks in increments. One moment of noticing, one pause before agreement, one quiet refusal to let fear decide for you. These moments accumulate, and accumulation changes the field. Your awakening, in this language, is not private. It is not isolated. It is described as cosmic, precisely because you are not separate from the whole. You are portrayed as a fragment of the source itself, a spark of fullness living inside a constrained world. That spark does not need to grow stronger, it needs to be remembered. And when it is, it behaves differently. It cannot be managed in the same way. It does not respond predictably to threats or promises. It does not feed on endless seeking. It recognizes what it already is. The old teachers suggested that the final eon would not be marked by signs in the sky or events everyone could point to at once. It would be marked by internal signals, a restlessness that does not resolve through achievement, a sense that the life you were told to want feels slightly misaligned, a pull towards something you cannot fully name, yet cannot dismiss, a growing resistance to shallow answers, even when they are convenient. These are not symptoms to be fixed. In the mythic language, they are signals. If you feel them, you are already participating in the transition, whether you intended to or not. One saying preserved from the desert speaks of a kingdom spread across the earth, unseen not because it is absent, but because people are trained to look elsewhere. In that understanding, the true fullness is not waiting in another realm. It is present, layered beneath appearances, obscured by habit and expectation. The final aeon is described as the moment when that layering thins enough for recognition to occur. Not everywhere at once, not for everyone at the same pace, but steadily. As this recognition spreads, the cycle that recycles awareness through forgetting begins to slow. The endless return, the repetition of patterns that feel inevitable, loses its grip when a soul remembers its origin. Such a soul does not respond to fear in the same way. It does not follow every light it is shown, or every voice that calls it back into old agreements. In symbolic language, it remembers what allows passage beyond the gatekeepers. In lived experience, this can feel like a growing inability to re-enter patterns that once felt unavoidable. You try, and something inside you refuses, not angrily, simply clearly. With each soul that steps out of unconscious repetition, the larger structure weakens, which may explain why attention feels so aggressively contested now, why distraction is constant, why division is amplified, why the world feels overwhelming, chaotic, pulled in too many directions at once. In mythic terms, this is what survival looks like for a system nearing its limits. It multiplies urgency, it intensifies fear, it accelerates illusion, hoping awareness will scatter again. Yet beneath the noise, something has already shifted. The final aeon is not approaching, it is unfolding. One reflection on the soul's journey describes awakening as a return, not to a place, but to a state of being, a shedding of accumulated identities until what remains is simple, luminous, unburdened. In that state, nothing built on confusion can hold you, not because you escape the world, but because the world no longer defines you in the same way. This is the liberation woven through the myth. Not departure, but freedom of movement. Not destruction, but clarity. What follows such a shift is left deliberately open. Some imagined transformation of the visible world itself, no longer experienced as a prison, but as a reflection of deeper order. Others sensed a change in perception so profound, it feels like inhabiting a different layer of the same reality, while those still asleep continue along familiar paths until readiness arrives. To make this felt rather than explained, the old storytellers returned to metaphor, reality as an ocean. Most lives unfold near the surface, where waves collide and currents pull relentlessly. In that turbulence, survival consumes attention. Descend, and everything changes. Movement slows, noise fades. At depth, stillness replaces struggle. Perspective widens. The final eon is portrayed as a collective draw toward those depths. Not synchronized, not uniform, but persistent. As more awareness gathers below the surface itself begins to reorganize, because in this worldview, reality reflects consciousness rather than dictates it. Shift the inner orientation, and the outer form follows. This is why paradigms collapse seemingly overnight, why structures that felt permanent suddenly feel obsolete, why what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The material world, in this telling, is downstream from the unseen. Change the source, and the flow must change. Despite the intensity of this transition, the myth insists on one thing with surprising gentleness. The final aeon is not about fear. It is not about punishment or annihilation. It is about the end of unnecessary suffering, the loosening of manipulation, the conclusion of cycles sustained by forgetting. Navigating it requires no allegiance, no institution, no external authority. Only remembrance, not the name you carry, not the roles you perform, Not the stories you've been repeating about who you are, but the presence that existed before all of that, before this body, before this lifetime, before any power claimed dominion over the lower realms. That presence is symbolized as a spark, indestructible, quiet, patient. It does not argue with illusion, it outlasts it. And perhaps that is why, in every version of the story, it is the one thing no system of control can ultimately survive. The final aeon does not stand somewhere ahead of you, waiting to arrive. It has been unfolding quietly all along, woven into the moments you have already lived, into the questions that surfaced without permission, into the pauses where something deeper asked to be felt rather than explained. If parts of this journey stirred recognition, unease, or a strange calm beneath the intensity, that response is not accidental. It is not a sign that you are late, lost, or falling behind. It suggests alignment with the pace your own awareness has been moving at, even when you could not clearly see it. Nothing you sensed here was wasted. Nothing you felt was out of place. The path described was never about effort or urgency, but about remembering what has always been quietly present beneath distraction and noise. You are not required to force clarity or reach conclusions. There is room here to rest inside what has already been revealed, to trust that the inner movement you noticed knows how to continue on its own. You have not been overlooked, and you are not walking this passage alone. The process unfolding within you is neither rushed nor delayed. It is shaped precisely to the season you are in now. What matters is not how far you think you have gone, but that something essential has already been acknowledged. As this awareness settles, it does not need to be held tightly. It can be carried lightly, allowed to deepen at its own rhythm. And when you feel ready to continue exploring what lies beneath the surface, there are other paths nearby, waiting to be noticed, that gently carry this same thread forward.